Episode 81 to Chaps Many Cultures. Welcome Monday. It is Monday, another week, and it's snowing outside. But that doesn't matter. We're talking today about people, purpose, and connecting the two with a very special guest. Stick around. Yes, you heard it here, folks. It's snowing.
What's up with that?
Oh, well, it's great.
What is that thing snow you're talking about? What is this?
I love it. I personally love it. After 20 years, the novelty hasn't worn off. But anyway, that is what it is.
Okay, so we have to put this into context. So it is snowing in the Chicagoland area, which is a very, very slim portion of the world, because in the rest of the world it isn't snowing. So it's a beautiful day outside. I don't know what you're talking about.
I know. I'm just, just being very local centric, It's
I'm wondering whether it's snowing. I'm wondering whether it's snowing on Europe's highest peaks and the Alpine Ridge.
Well,
who could we ask to find out?
We might find out. And because today we're talking about connecting people with purpose. So there's two ways of looking at that: either connecting people that have purpose or connecting people with their purpose. And perhaps we just need to speak to somebody who has some expertise in this area and does a lot of work in that area. Please welcome Darcy Roehling. How are you, mate?
Welcome. Hi, gentlemen. Good day, mate.
Hey, Darcy.
Gentlemen. Yes. Oh, you got the wrong show. Sorry. I think.
Sorry, we got to end this now, gentlemen. Is it snowing in? Well, first of all, Darcy, you are our expert for all things weather in the Western Alpine Ridge. I so learned in the green room. So, what's the weather situation in your corner of the world?
So I'm based in France. I'm about 40 minutes from Geneva, Switzerland, and on sort of the foothills of the Alps. So you'd be heading up to go to the Three Valleys or Courchevel or Le Clusaz or Megève, heading in our direction. So right now it's fall weather with some rain. But of course, when it's raining down below, it starts, the further up you go, it starts to snow. So there's a little bit of snow on the top, but not much right now. So we're waiting for it to come. It will eventually be here.
Okay, Brett. So don't be a snowflake. Accept the weather. Okay.
That's right. Well, it's still time to wax the skis.
All right.
All right. Well, Darcy, thanks for joining us. How was your weekend?
My weekend was great. Thank you. Yeah, really good. Went on a very, very long hike, and I've picked up knitting. So I'm knitting myself a sweater. So we'll see how that works out. Everyone in my family's laughing, so we'll see. It might be a pot holder, but that's the goal. So a sweater for myself. So you can invite me back in about 6 months to see if I actually complete it.
Just turn into a scarf, can't it?
It might. Or napkin.
Pictures or it didn't happen.
So I have you on here to talk about connecting people with purpose. What does this actually mean? I mean, really, in the seriousness of the light of day, connecting people with purpose, either, as I said, connecting people that have purpose, two people together, or people with their own purpose. Is it a bit of both, or what takes precedence?
Well, I think I'm assuming you're asking me this and not Christian, right? So, okay.
Pointless.
We don't want your opinion. Yeah. I think, I think that most people have a sense of purpose. But, I think in particularly in this time in COVID, a lot of people are looking for something more meaningful in their lives in the way that they can contribute, either in their local communities or through work, their work, or, all kinds of different efforts. So I think it's, it morphs, and of course for everyone it's different, but I think, I think we all have some sense of purpose, and sometimes we just don't know what that purpose is, and it sort of appears by maybe volunteering, or making some connections, doing something at work, maybe through a corporate social responsibility initiatives and as such. So I think it depends. It really depends on the individual. For me, it came through a myriad of ways, including doing CSR for some of the companies that I worked for, as well as doing a lot of volunteering. Sorry, the sun is coming in right now. So now, Christian, it is sunny. So
yes.
I'm blinded by the light.
So you said your purpose became clear to you through a variety of developments. So how would you describe your purpose today? What, in simple terms, what is your purpose, Darcy?
Well, I'm a champion of sustainability, and I sort of have been in that ethos for quite a long time. I'm a vegetarian, been a vegetarian for about 28 years, and now that's kind of the nouveau kind of thing to be doing. Sort of leaning a little bit more towards veganism, and raised my kids and my family. I have meat eaters in my family, but sort of have been able to shift that dial a little bit to be more of a plant-friendly diet. So that's one aspect of it. For work and the work that I do, I work for a UK consulting company, and we look at we do a lot of leadership development, and we work with leaders to help them to align their business strategy, their sustainability strategy, and perhaps, as most organizations are going through some kind of transformational change and as such. So in that respect, and then really, as I mentioned just a few moments ago, a lot of it is my volunteering. I do a lot of mentoring of women in developing countries. I do a lot of mentoring for women here locally. I've worked with refugees here. So all of these kind of, I've always kind of, in tandem with what I'm doing, have done something that is with purpose. I get a lot of reward in helping other people. It just gives me a lot of satisfaction. So yeah.
The giver's gain, as some smart person once wrote, and I forgot the name of the author of that book. So when you volunteer with, you said women, and lots of women who are displaced or migrated voluntarily or involuntarily, is that what I'm hearing?
No, there's a couple. To be honest, I do a lot of volunteering. So one group that I volunteer with, we're helping women that are putting together. I volunteer with an organization in Geneva, and we help women who have a business plan but need some technical skills. It's not giving money, but it's actually supporting them. So maybe helping them with their business strategy, marketing strategy, social media. It could be anything, helping with managing the finances or something like that. And oftentimes these are women. We vote on projects, and then we get teams together that are multidisciplinary and support these women. So I worked on a team that was supporting a woman who was heading up an association for disabled people in Burkina Faso. And so we had 4 of us, which was really culturally diverse team. I'm American, had a Turkish woman who had really good project management skills. We had a Nigerian woman, and then a British woman who did all the marketing and as such. So we together spoke with this woman in the association and some of the other members, and tried to help them expand and sort of hit their key performance indicators by using our own. So it's skills-based volunteering as an example. So that's, that was a project I did. I have mentored through the Sherry Blair Foundation. That's Tony Blair's wife. And I worked with a woman who is based in Cyprus, and she has a business and needed some business coaching on how to take her business into the next level. Her family business, actually. So spent a lot of time speaking with her. And then locally, those are all quite international, which I really like that blend of cultures and as such. But where I live locally in this alpine town, as I mentioned, just outside of Geneva on the French side, we have a lot of refugees that come here. And I've volunteered. I used to be a board member, and this association supports and helps predominantly the children of refugees. The kids are required by law. They're in shelter right now, in family shelter, and the kids are required to go to school, but they might not know how to help their children because they don't speak fluent French, nor do I. But you help them with their homework, and so we did homework clubs. So we would go. I often was with the younger kids, so I was just helping them color and asking them what the colors were and everything. But there were other people that spoke fluent French or speak fluent French who were helping with their homework with math and making sure that, what was in their homework assignments were getting, that they were doing their homework properly because the parents weren't able to help. So a myriad of different kinds of things, not specifically women, but certainly that's where my passion is in helping women. But of course, I won't turn away anybody that needs support.
Nice.
Yeah. So, Darcy, as somebody who's got a really rich background in understanding cultures and learning and how different people come to the world through their cultural lens, would you and a lot of our clients actually do ask about this volunteering when they're moving to another country and when they're going to another country, but how much do you advise that people do really get a good firm understanding of some of the cultural differences they're going to come across when they're working in the volunteer world as well, right? I mean, you obviously want inclusion. You want many people from different cultures to be involved in volunteering, but you have that background. But would you say that some people don't, and they need to really kind of learn that as kind of a natural step into getting into volunteering internationally?
That's a really great point that you raised, Brett. And to be honest, I never thought about it, but you're right. I mean, I've spent 25 of my years in Asia Pacific. And when I was in China, I volunteered. When I was in Singapore, I volunteered. And certainly, as I mentioned, being here in France. And yeah, I think it's an easy way. I mean, certainly, because of language, let's use the example here. Of language, I'm with a lot of expats. But we're helping to support the local community. We work with the Red Cross and we work with other organizations here locally. So you do get to understand sort of the processes and some of the organizations at a local level. But it is a great way. I've had some great friendships. I did the same thing in Singapore, volunteering for, I was part of a women's association. And then we helped a local woman in Singapore with a business that she was running and getting women of low income to help with their sewing skills, as an example. Now, Singapore is an English language speaking country predominantly, so it was much easier to be part of that culture and in that environment. But you're most certainly right. I mean, in that experience, I was working with Singaporeans. Certainly, the team of sewers and the woman that ran that business was Singaporean, and then working with some expats. So it had a really nice blend. So, but now, I mean, my French isn't all that good, but I'm still able to help. I can volunteer, I can supervise, I have a whistle, I can go, everybody get in line, and really helps support the kids. And like I said, I can say the colors in French and tell them how beautiful their blue is and their pink is and as such. But I think you're right. I think it's a great way, certainly, to give back. You can sort of understand the local community, improve your language skills, and then get to know expatriates because you might need some support in respect to that. They can certainly help you and give you some ideas and point you in the right direction where you need certain support as such. So yeah, I think it's a fantastic way. And never actually, I have to be honest, I never really thought about that. In all the years of intercultural, go volunteer. We're always so focused on going for the job, go get a job. But volunteering is a fantastic way to get to know the local community. I agree with you. Yeah, thanks for raising that.
Well, just thinking about in the terms of sometimes the non-working spouse that perhaps will not have the ability to continue a career, or maybe taking a pause in a career, and they find it a good opportunity to take some time. So oftentimes I think we've got, we're in the US here, and a lot of volunteering organizations, they're everywhere but in other countries, sometimes they're a little bit harder to find because maybe the government, maybe there's a public infrastructure that takes care of some of these things. So that might. Do you find that there's a difference in the different places you've worked? The way that your entry into these organizations is there differences? Well,
yeah, it's a very good point. So we'll use China as an example. When I lived in China, and I'm I'm a mediocre Chinese speaker. And yeah, when I volunteered, I was not volunteering for a Chinese association. I was volunteering with some expats, and as such. So you're spot on. And I don't know how much influence I could have, but those are often government supported organizations and as such. So yeah, I mean, I think you are a little bit sensitive, where you're volunteering and as such. But at the end of the day, I think every nook and cranny in the world needs some support. So again, even if language is the issue, I mean, you can drive kids somewhere, or you can take them to a football match or whatever. You don't need language for something like that. So I think it certainly is a great way, but your point's well taken. It may vary depending on the location, but I think if you're moved to a new place, you certainly are going to be exposed to people who would know where to go for volunteering. And in fact, a lot of expat groups, they do set up volunteer groups to support local causes. So I've seen it sort of to be led to the right direction.
Right.
In my experience, I come from a culture that is not as primed to volunteering. Maybe I come from a society where there's a lot of public infrastructure for support system, taxpayer supported infrastructure, right? And many European societies have similar models set up that way. So in my native culture of Germany, yes, there are nonprofits. Yes, there is volunteering, whether it's faith-based or not. However, the level of volunteering across the board did not match what I met in the United States. So for me, the level of charitable engagement, volunteering, giving time, money, and effort and brain power to causes, that was something that I needed to get used to. That was a new experience for me living in the United States. And once I did recognize how this works and what's actually, I want to say what's in it for me, but it had an effect on me as well, right? So it wasn't just that I gave time; it also did something with me. It helped distill purpose to pick up on that, right? However, for me, that was a learning experience. I was not raised that way. So, and I wonder how many other cultures around the world do not necessarily come up in their environment with that sense of, well, there is work, and then there is my private social life, friends and family, and then here is one niche that I carve out for the public, for the greater common good, for volunteering. It wasn't like that for me. Maybe it's just my family that's weird, or maybe it's the entire culture. But what is it like in Australia, Brett? Is there a groundswell? Is there something that primes you for this in Australian culture?
Well, I think Darcy's point is that Australia would be one of those places where there's a public infrastructure, that takes care of it. The health system would be one example. Is that it's it's free at the point of entry, so it's it is an easier kind of way to provide care through the public system. But still, Australians would be very much on the side of volunteering, trying to get involved and supporting local communities as well. Yeah, for sure. So, Darcy, you've got a podcast. How long has your podcast been going for? So this is something you're actually talking to women and that are doing this work. How long's that been going for?
Well, I had the idea before COVID, so I'd just like to put that in there. And no, I'm not baking sourdough bread, but what, that's what they say. They say people during COVID have been doing two things: starting a podcast or baking sourdough bread. So,
Right.
So yeah, I don't know if you've heard that. I don't know where I read that.
Or starting a live show.
Starting a live show. There you go. There you go. We'll throw that into the bucket too.
Yeah.
I had this idea for quite some time. So I've have been very passionate about, and I'm not sure how familiar your listeners are to the Sustainable Development Goals, but the Sustainable Development Goals were set up in 2015 by the United Nations. There's sort of these universal call to action for us to look at issues such as, poverty, protection of the planet, and ensuring equity and equality for all. So there are 17 goals. I've got a little pin on here that you might, I don't know if you're listener, the reader, you can see there. So and there are 17. You probably can't see this
you
backwards,
can see
but there are 17 goals, and under each of the goals there are a bunch of indicators, and companies use this in order to report out on their own performance related to the Sustainable Development Goals. So one of them is no poverty, as an example, or zero hunger, quality education, gender equality, partnerships for the goals, and so forth and so on. So I've been, sort of quite passionate about this. I've attended a lot of conferences and speaking with people, through my work in consulting that are involved in sustainability or corporate social responsibility. And it was, I've been thinking about starting a podcast for a long time. And it was it was just about a year ago. I was in Singapore and I went out for lunch with a former colleague of mine from a long, long time ago. She's Italian and she lives in Singapore. And so we went out for lunch and I said, what are you up to? And, we were just exchanging. I was there on a business trip. And she was telling me about this amazing work that she was doing, which actually I have to say, she didn't really think that it was so amazing. But what she was sharing is how she started, there was a putting green in the condo that she lived in Singapore, and how she sort of saw this plot of land and thought, well, nobody putts, nobody's putting there. I mean, you never see anybody, there's people running on it, but there's this big space. What can we do with this space? And when she was on the board of her condo, and then just went to them and said, why don't we use this for growing fruits and vegetables? Why don't we, create our own little garden here? And then this sort of happened, and sort of blossomed and got really galvanized the whole condo. And if you know, Singapore is really multicultural, and in her condo there are 3 ethnic groups. You have the Chinese, you've got mostly from the southern part of India, the Tamils, and you have Malays, and then of course you have actually 4 groups, and you've got a lot of expatriates of varying nationalities. And it really was a great way for her to bring the whole building together, because it's made up of all of these different nationalities. And then you have generations. So you have, young kids that were in primary school and middle school, and then you've got people that were retired. And she just galvanized this whole community to build this amazing garden. And so I'm completely gobsmacked. So my chin's on the ground, and I'm like, this is extraordinary. She's like, yeah, her father, she comes from an agricultural background. Her father has a olive grove in Italy. So she was quite sort of familiar with this, but Singapore's land is not really the best for planting. And I don't know what the percentage is, but it's a very high percentage. I know it's shifting to sort of vertical farming, but there was a high percentage of fruits and vegetables that came in from all over the world, including Australia, the US, and across the border in Malaysia. And then what happened was she went to an event that was across the street. They had there was an autistic center across the street. And this was a lot of probing. Like, I'm asking her all these questions. She was not offering any of this up. She was quite humble and modest. So I was already thinking, wow, this is great. And then she said, yeah. And then this autistic center, I went to this event. I was speaking with the director of the autistic center, and they had a garden on the roof. And I said, well, what are you doing with the garden? He's like, well, the parents just take it home. The children that are in the sort of teenagers and young adults are cultivating the garden and as such. And then, workers, people, the staff and families would just take the fruits and vegetables home. And so Rosa had this idea to take all these fruits and vegetables and take the young adults that were working there and bring them over to the condo to sell the fruits and vegetables to the condo people. Now, I'm not super familiar with autism, but I do know that there's a lot of issues that would be related to, eye contact and loud noises and touching, money and unfamiliar situations. And what she did was she put together a program where she took these young adults, went door to door with the families that agreed that they would do that. They exchanged money. They got these fruits and vegetables, and started to exchange and have this kind of dialogue. And what happens is, you can imagine, it's really great for the people that are these young adults and growing and as such, and really great for the community, because they had exposure to a center that was just across the street that they didn't have any interaction, because it's not a physical disability, so they wouldn't actually maybe understand this. And so you now have a whole, you've got children and families that are exposed to a whole new part of their community. So sorry, that was a bit long-winded, but really, like, I literally, by this point, I was off my chair, and she was very humble about it. She's like, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's, da da da." And what struck me is, what struck me and why I started this podcast. So there were two things that she did that actually sort of changed the trajectory of this. They were two questions. And that's what I think is really critical. She first said, "What are we doing with this putting green that nobody's using?" So that's a question. You're just curiosity, just asking a question. And the second, "What are you doing with your vegetables at the autistic center? What are you doing with these? And those two questions have changed her whole community. And so it's you were saying earlier, Christian, about sort of the culture and things like that. I think there are gaps everywhere in, whether I'm in a country right now where, we pay very high taxes, as you do in Germany, very high taxes, and that there's a big social safety net. However, there are gaps everywhere. And by golly, you just need to ask the right question. And so she kind of gave me the heave-ho, the push to do this. And I had been thinking about it. And again, she was just so humble. She's like, "I don't really have much to say." And I'm like, it is an extraordinary story. And of course, she didn't do it alone. It was the community. And now she's, so she was my inspiration to start this podcast. The podcast itself is focusing on these 17 Sustainable Development Goals and women who are contributing to the 17 sustainable goals. So yes, there we are. It's Women17 space. And so I interview fortnightly. They're usually 20 to 40 minutes conversations with global women. So they're from all over the world, and they're contributing to various goals. So in the case of Rosa, she was contributing to responsible consumption was one of the examples. So the story with Rosa goes even further, because she also works with her father in Italy, but you have to listen to the podcast in order to hear the extent of that. So yeah. So,
well, you brought up, you said it a couple of times, and we've mentioned on a couple of other episodes that we've been on about developing cultural competency and really effective leadership often comes out of curiosity. It comes out of asking the right questions. You're seeing something and asking, why is it the way it is? And what can we do to change it, right? And so that you brought it up organically in the conversation, but I think that's a really big point. It was an impactful thing in a global leadership course that I did over a week, and it just kept coming up. Curiosity. Never be satisfied with the answer. Always look for more stuff. And in that particular case, although she was very humble, look at the effect that curiosity had. I mean, it just affected so many people subsequently, the further she asked those questions. I think that's fantastic.
Nice.
Absolutely. I put the link to the podcast in the comments here for those channels that it will show up. But you can also, if you search, I would actually just search Darcy's name. It comes up world famous.
It's like Madonna, right?
Right, exactly. Darcy Madonna.
Darcy.
And the benefit of this is, while you make your sourdough bread, you can listen to the podcast. So
there you go.
Very COVID friendly.
While you're knitting your sweater, by the way.
There we go. Yeah. And I have to say, I mean, I'm not, to be honest, I'm not, the podcast's not about me. I'm not very good at it. But I I have some really amazing women that participate. And so it's asking the right questions and teasing out the right things. I mean, I've got people that are working in partnerships, that are looking at reducing inequalities, that are looking at gender diversity, looking at consumption. I mean, there's a whole bunch that are coming out in the next couple of weeks also. But don't tune into me, tune into these amazing women, because it's meant to amplify their voices, even when they don't want to be amplified. So careful if you get a call from me, maybe you don't pick up the phone unless you want to be on my podcast.
Well, I think we've got a couple of suggestions. I got a couple of people I'm going to point in your direction, because I saw that. No, I listened to the episode where you said, send me some suggestions of people. We got plenty of them. We're very lucky to be connected with some wonderful women in this world that do great things. And
and often it is the people that would not toot their own horn, but when they're feeling safe with an interview partner or somebody who is contextualizing it for them, that will allow them to blast at their full volume, right? So thanks for doing that.
Yeah. And I think what's one of my high school friends shared with me that she listens to the podcast when she's in the car with her daughter, who's a teenager. And I thought that's really great, because the last question I always ask is, what would you advise someone that's interested, a woman, or it could be anyone, of course, who's interested in pursuing what you're doing? And you get some really great advice. I think that's really important, because, learning and listening, it goes back to the question you asked at the very beginning, Brett, about, when you go overseas, it's just, learning and asking these kinds of questions and getting involved. It's so important. And I just am so happy that young listeners are listening too, because it could change the shape of what they do with their lives. And particularly these days, there's so many needs.
Yeah. So here's where you find this. I expect all of you to write this down now, or you can take a screenshot, or you simply go to Brett's YouTube, or you go to my YouTube, or you go to Brett's Facebook, or you go to Brett's LinkedIn. I don't care where you go. Just simply click on the link. It's easy, people. Get the podcast.
Absolutely. Well, Darcy, thank you so much for your time. This has been great. Really appreciate it. And for those who want to be a guest on Darcy's podcast, reach out to her. And on our side of the coin, of course, just come and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Share this episode out. Share it with the young women in your life that need to be given great ideas about connecting with their purpose and doing inspiring things in the world. Thank you again, everybody. Another day is in the can, another Monday. We'll be back tomorrow, Tuesday, hopefully less snow. But thank you, Darcy, so much.
Thanks for inviting me.
Thank you. A bientôt.
A bientôt.